This black woman was driving home after a late-night shift when she slowed down upon spotting a motionless figure outside an abandoned warehouse along the road. Knowing full well that stopping could drag her into trouble, she stepped out anyway, her heart pounding as she realized it was a white man, filthy, burning with fever and close to death. Without hesitation, she took him home and cared for him for days. That reckless choice would soon bring loss, judgment, and set off a chain of changes neither of them could have ever anticipated. Redwood Falls, Ohio is the kind of town where everyone knows your business but pretends they don't. Population 4,200, one traffic light, a diner that closes at 7 p.m., and a church that fills up every Sunday because there's nothing else to do. Alicia Brown had lived here her whole life, 38 years, same streets, same faces, same quiet that pressed against your chest like a weight you couldn't name. She used to work at Mercy General 40 minutes east, home health aide, 12-hour shifts, driving to strangers' houses to help them eat, bathe, remember their own names. She was good at it. Maybe too good. The kind of good that made people think she had no limits. 3 years ago, a woman named Patricia called her crying, said her mother was dying, said she couldn't afford proper care, said please, just a few weeks, I'll pay you back. Alicia said yes. 8 weeks later, Patricia disappeared. No payment, no phone calls, no forwarding address, just an empty bank account and a lesson Alicia would carry in her bones. Kindness has a price, and sometimes you're the only one who pays it. She quit Mercy General after that. Not because of the money, because of the way her supervisor looked at her when she reported what happened. Like she was stupid. Like she deserved it. Like black women who trust too easily get exactly what's coming to them. Now she worked 2 jobs. Morning shift at the gas station, evening shift cleaning offices in the next town over. She came home tired, ate alone, watched television she didn't really see and went to bed. Every day the same. Every day a small act of survival disguised as living. Her house was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that hadn't been updated since 1987. But it was hers, paid off after 15 years of scraping. The only thing in the world that belonged completely to her. She didn't date, didn't go to church anymore, didn't answer the door when neighbors knocked with casseroles and questions. She had learned to make herself small, invisible, safe. Some nights she sat on her porch and watched the sun go down behind the empty lot across the street. She didn't think about the future. The future was just more of the same. And that was fine. Fine was enough. Fine was all she asked for. 600 miles east, Daniel Whitman was learning that rock bottom has a basement. He stood outside a bar in Columbus at 2 a.m., patting his pockets for a wallet he'd lost 3 days ago. Or maybe someone stole it. Hard to remember, hard to care. 46 years old, former attorney, graduate of Yale Law School, son of Richard Whitman Sr., who built an empire out of nothing and died leaving it to his eldest son Robert. Daniel got nothing. That's not entirely true. He got a trust fund. A generous one by most standards. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of his life without working a single day. But comfort isn't the same as purpose. And purpose was something Daniel had been chasing since he was old enough to understand that his brother would always come first. Robert was the golden child. The one who could do no wrong, the one who inherited their father's company, their father's ambition, their father's coldness. At 52, Robert Whitman was worth $4.2 billion. He owned newspapers, television stations, a hedge fund, and the respect of everyone who mattered. Daniel owned a suitcase he couldn't find, and a drinking problem he couldn't admit. It hadn't always been this way. There was a time when Daniel believed in things: justice, fairness, the law as a tool for the powerless. He'd worked legal aid for almost a decade, exposed a pharmaceutical company that was poisoning groundwater in West Virginia, won a landmark case for migrant workers in California. He'd been good at something that mattered. Then his wife left, said she couldn't compete with his causes, said she wanted a husband, not a martyr. Then his mother died. Cancer, quick and brutal and unfair. Then Robert cut him off. Not financially, emotionally. Said Daniel was an embarrassment. Said his lifestyle reflected poorly on the family. Said maybe they should take some time apart. Some time became 3 years. 3 years became a blur of cheap hotels, cheaper whiskey, and the slow realization that nobody was coming to save him. Nobody even noticed he was drowning. He'd stopped shaving, stopped calling old friends, stopped pretending he had anywhere to be. The trust fund checks kept coming, but he'd lost his ID, his bank cards, everything that connected him to the person he used to be. Now he was just a man standing outside a bar in the middle of the night, trying to remember which direction led to the shelter that might still have a bed. He started walking. Didn't know where. Didn't matter. The road would take him somewhere. It always did. 200 miles later, he collapsed outside an abandoned warehouse on the edge of a town he'd never heard of. Redwood Falls, Ohio. Population 4,200. About to become 4,201. The evening shift at Morrison & Associates ended at 11 p.m. 45 minutes of vacuuming, another 30 wiping down desks, 15 more taking out trash that smelled like cold coffee and desperation. Alicia clocked out at 11:02 and walked to her car in the empty parking lot. The drive home took 20 minutes. She knew every curve, every pothole, every spot where deer liked to cross. She drove it on autopilot, her mind somewhere else entirely. Grocery list. Utility bill due Friday. That weird noise the furnace had been making. She turned onto Miller Road at 11:24, past the gas station where she worked mornings, past the church, past the empty lot where kids used to play baseball before they all grew up and moved away. And then she saw him. A shape on the ground, just outside the old Hendricks warehouse, the one that had been empty for 6 years, ever since the auto parts company went bankrupt and took 40 jobs with it. Her foot lifted off the gas, her hands tightened on the wheel. A black woman, alone, almost midnight, a strange man on the ground. She knew the math, knew it the way every black woman in America knows it. You stop to help, and suddenly you're the one explaining yourself. Why were you there? What were you doing? What's your relationship to this man? The shape wasn't moving. She slowed down, pulled to the side of the road, sat there with the engine running, headlights cutting through the dark. A man, she could see that now, lying on his side, one arm stretched out like he'd been reaching for something before he fell. White man, dirty clothes, too thin. The math got worse. A black woman bringing a white man anywhere, to her car, to a hospital, to her home. Every scenario ended with questions she didn't want to answer, looks she didn't want to see, assumptions she couldn't fight. She'd heard the stories. The woman in Georgia who called 911 for a car accident and ended up in handcuffs because the officer decided she must have caused it. The nurse in Tennessee who performed CPR on a stranger and got sued by his family for breaking his ribs. The home health aide in Mississippi who found her patient dead and spent 6 hours in an interrogation room because someone had to be blamed. Call 911. The smart part of her brain was clear. Let the professionals handle it. You don't know this person. You don't owe this person anything. But she didn't reach for her phone. Not yet, because something about the way he was lying there didn't look like drunk. It looked like sick. Really sick. The kind of sick where minutes mattered and waiting for an ambulance meant waiting for a body. She thought about Patricia. The money, the betrayal, the way trust could be weaponized against you. She thought about her mother, dead 8 years now, who never once walked past someone who needed help, who used to say the world will give you 1,000 reasons to close your heart, don't let it. She thought about Mrs. Gonzalez, 92 years old, no family. Alicia had held her hand every night for 3 weeks at the end. When Mrs. Gonzalez died, Alicia was the only one there, the only one who cried. Her hands were still on the wheel, still tight, still ready to drive away, but her foot wasn't on the gas. Damn it, she whispered. She turned off the engine, got out of the car. The February air hit her like a slap, that sharp Ohio cold that found every gap in your jacket and settled into your bones. Hello? She kept her distance. 10 feet. 15. Far enough to run if she needed to. Sir? Are you okay? No response. No movement. Just the wind and her own breathing, and the sound of her heart pounding in her ears. She took 3 steps closer. Stopped. Listened for other sounds. Other cars. Other people who might see this and draw conclusions. Nothing. 4 more steps. 5. Close enough now to see his face in the dim light from the warehouse's broken windows. Pale. Too pale. lips cracked and almost blue, sweat on his forehead despite the freezing temperature. His breathing was shallow, rapid, wrong. She crouched down, still not touching him. "Sir, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered, opened halfway, looked at her without seeing her. "Help." The word came out as a whisper, a breath, barely human. She pressed the back of her hand to his forehead, burning. The kind of fever that meant infection, organ stress, maybe worse. Her training kicked in. 8 years of home health care. 8 years of reading bodies, recognizing symptoms, knowing when someone was hours away from dying. This man was hours away from dying. "Call 911. The voice in her head was louder now. "Urgent. An ambulance can be here in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. She looked at his breathing, listened to the wet rattle underneath it. 20 minutes might as well be 20 hours. She stood up, looked at her car, looked at the man, looked at the empty road stretching in both directions, offering no guidance and no witnesses. She could leave, get in her car and drive home and pretend she never saw anything. No one would know. No one would blame her. He was a stranger, a white stranger in dirty clothes who could be anyone, could have done anything. She thought about her house, her safe, small, quiet house, where nothing bad could reach her because she never let anything in. She thought about who she used to be. Before Patricia, before the walls, she thought about who she'd become. Someone who calculated risk before kindness. Someone who saw a dying man and did the math. "Okay," she said, out loud, to herself, to him, to whatever part of her was still the woman her mother raised. "Okay." She went back to her car, popped the trunk, grabbed the old blanket she kept there for emergencies, roadside breakdowns, unexpected cold, situations exactly like this one that she'd never actually expected. She came back and wrapped it around him as best she could. His body was shaking, tremors running through him like electricity. "I'm going to help you," she said, "but I need you to try. Can you try to stand?" He didn't respond. His eyes had closed again. She pulled out her phone, not to call 911, to text her neighbor Darlene, the only white woman on her street who had ever treated her like a person instead of a curiosity. "If anything happens to me tonight, there's a white man in my house. Found him on Miller Road by the Hendricks warehouse, documenting everything. Not my choice, just doing what I have to do." She hit send. Then she took a photo of him lying there, the warehouse behind him, the timestamp in the corner. Evidence. Armor. The things a black woman learns to gather when she knows the world won't take her word for anything. She bent down, hooked her arms under his, started to drag. He was heavier than he looked. Dead weight mostly, his body limp and unresponsive. She pulled him 3 feet, stopped to catch her breath, pulled again. The gravel scraped against his clothes, his head lolled to one side. "Don't you die on me," she muttered. "Don't you dare die on me before I get you in this car." It took her 10 minutes to get him to the Honda, another 5 to wrestle him into the back seat, his long legs folded at awkward angles, his head resting against the door. She stood there in the cold, breathing hard, sweat cooling on her skin despite the freezing temperature. Then she got in the driver's seat and headed home. The drive took 4 minutes, felt like 40. She kept checking the rear-view mirror, watching him in the darkness of the back seat, still breathing, still shaking, still alive but barely. She parked in her driveway and sat there for a moment with the engine off. The house in front of her, small, dark, familiar. The house where nothing bad had happened in 3 years because she'd made sure nothing happened at all. Last chance to call someone else. Last chance to make this someone else's problem. She got out, opened the back door. The cold hit her again, sharper now. "Hey." She shook his shoulder. "I need you to wake up. I can't carry you." His eyes opened, barely confused. "Where?" "My house. I need you to stand. Can you stand?" He tried, failed, tried again. She got her shoulder under his arm and heaved, and somehow, he got his feet under him and stayed there swaying like a tree in a storm. They made it to the front door in a stumbling, halting shuffle. She unlocked it one-handed, kicked it open, guided him through. The living room was dark. She didn't turn on the lights, didn't want neighbors seeing shadows moving in her windows at midnight. Down the hall, to the spare bedroom. Her mother's room, the one she'd kept exactly the same for 8 years because changing it felt like forgetting. She lowered him onto the bed. He collapsed against the pillows, his breathing loud and labored in the quiet room. She found the thermometer in the bathroom cabinet, pressed it to his forehead. 103.4, high, dangerous, but not quite deadly. Not yet. She worked from memory, from training, from 8 years of watching bodies fight and fail and sometimes win. Cool washcloth on his forehead, small sips of water forced between cracked lips, an extra blanket when the shivering got worse, taken away when the fever spiked higher. She set a timer on her phone, check every 15 minutes, listen for the rattle, watch for the signs. At 2 a.m. he started talking, not to her, to people who weren't there. "I'm sorry," he said. The words slurred together, feverish and desperate. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." She sat in the chair by the door, close enough to help, far enough to run, and didn't respond. These weren't confessions meant for her. They were the things that came out when the body was too weak to keep them locked away. "Mom," his voice cracked. "Mom, I tried to be there. I tried to be what you wanted." Alicia watched his face, the pain written across it, the grief that went deeper than the fever. "Robert," the name came out bitter. "Robert, you have to listen, you have to. Why won't you listen?" She filed the names away. "Mom, Robert," pieces of a puzzle she hadn't asked to solve. At 4 a.m. the rattle came, that wet bubbling sound from deep in his chest, the sound she'd been listening for. The sound that meant his lungs were filling with what they shouldn't, to pneumonia. Had to be, bacterial probably, from the way it came on so fast, maybe brewing for days while he wandered the roads, his body slowly giving out. She had antibiotics in her cabinet, amoxicillin from a sinus infection 3 months ago. Not ideal, not the right drug, not the right dosage, but better than nothing. Better than watching him drown from the inside. She crushed 2 pills into water, lifted his head with one hand, held the cup to his lips with the other. "Drink. Come on, drink." Most of it went in, some dribbled down his chin. She wiped it away and laid him back against the pillow. At 5 a.m. his fever spiked to 104.1. She filled the bathtub with cool water, dragged him down the hall, easier now that she'd done it once, her muscles remembering even as they screamed. Got him in the tub with his clothes on because there was no time and no dignity left to preserve. He gasped when the water hit his skin, eyes flying open, arms flailing. "It's okay." She held him down, firm but not rough. "It's okay. I need to bring your temperature down. Just breathe. Just breathe." He stopped fighting. Whether from trust or exhaustion she couldn't tell. His eyes found hers and held them. "Who are you?" he whispered. "Someone who found you. Why?" She didn't answer, didn't have an answer, just kept him in the water until his skin cooled and the thermometer read 103.2 and she could get him back to bed without worrying he'd die in the next 5 minutes. At 6 a.m. the sun started to rise. Alicia sat in her chair, exhausted in ways she'd forgotten existed. Her back ached, her arms were sore, her eyes burned from a night without sleep, but he was still breathing, still alive, still fighting. She watched the light creep across the room, touching the cross on the wall that had been her mother's, the quilted blanket that had been her grandmother's, the faded wallpaper that had been there longer than she'd been alive. "Thank you." She looked up. He was awake, really awake, eyes open, focused, present for the first time since she'd found him. "You should rest," she said. "You saved my life. You're not saved yet. You've got pneumonia in your chest and a fever that keeps spiking. You need a hospital." "No." The word came out fast, scared. "No hospital. They'll find me. They'll call." "Who?" She leaned forward. "Who's going to find you? Who's going to call?" He closed his eyes, turned his head away. "No one. Never mind. That's not how this works." Her voice was harder now, sharper. "I pulled you off the side of the road. I brought you into my home. I've been keeping you alive for 6 hours while you talk to people who aren't here. You don't get to say never mind." Silence, long and heavy. "My name is Daniel," he said finally. "Daniel Whitman. Daniel Whitman. And who's Robert?" His jaw tightened. "My brother." "And why don't you want him to find you?" Another silence. Then because he's the reason I'm like this, because he decided I wasn't worth the trouble, because every time I hear his voice, I remember that I'll never be good enough for anyone who matters. Alicia sat back. The answer was more than she'd expected, more honest, more broken. What does your brother do? He owns things, companies, newspapers, people. A bitter laugh. He's worth $4 billion, maybe 5 by now. I stopped keeping track. $4 billion. She let that sink in. The man in her mother's bed, dying of pneumonia in dirty clothes, was the brother of a billionaire. And you, she said, what do you do? Nothing. Not anymore. I used to be a lawyer, used to think I could make a difference, used to believe in things. He opened his eyes, looked at the ceiling. Now I just try to make it through another day. She could push, could demand more answers, could point out that a man with a billionaire brother had options she could never dream of, had no excuse for ending up collapsed outside a warehouse in the middle of nowhere, Ohio. But she saw something in his face, the same thing she'd seen in her own mirror 3 years ago, after Patricia, after the betrayal, the look of someone who'd given up. Ground rules, she said instead. You stay in this room unless I say otherwise. You don't touch anything that isn't yours. You don't answer the door or the phone. And if I find out you're running from the law or bringing danger to my house, I will have police here so fast you'll think I had them on speed dial. He nodded, slowly. We're clear. Good. Now rest. I'll bring you something to eat. She stood up and walked to the door. Wait. She stopped. Didn't turn around. Why? He asked. You don't know me. You have no reason to help me. Why are you doing this? She thought about the question, turned it over in her mind like a stone. Because I found you, she said finally. Because I stopped. Because I couldn't not stop, even when I wanted to. And once you stop, you're in it. That's just how it works. She left the room, closed the door behind her, went to the kitchen and made breakfast for 2. The second day was harder. His fever spiked and dropped. A war inside his body that she could only watch, could only fight with cool cloths and crushed pills and prayers she didn't quite believe in anymore. He talked more in his sleep, names she didn't recognize, places she'd never been, apologies for things she couldn't understand. I tried, he said again and again. I tried to be enough. Why wasn't I enough? She didn't answer, couldn't answer. Some questions weren't meant for her. At midnight, his fever hit 104.6. She was running out of options, running out of time. The antibiotics were helping. She could hear it in his breathing, the rattle slightly less wet than before, but not enough, not fast enough. She sat by his bed and did the math again, the same math she'd done on Miller Road, with different numbers now. Hospital 40 minutes away, questions she didn't want to answer, looks she didn't want to see. The assumption, the certainty that a black woman who brought in a sick white man must have done something wrong. Home, inadequate supplies, inadequate training, inadequate everything, but also familiar, safe, hers. If he died here, in this room, in this bed, what would happen? Who would believe her story? Who would care? She thought about her mother, about Mrs. Gonzalez, about every person she'd ever helped, and every person who'd ever looked at her like helping was suspicious. I'm taking you to the hospital, she said. His eyes opened, fever bright and scared. No, please, I can't. You can and you will. She stood up. Your fever is 104.6, your lungs are full of fluid. I've done everything I can do here, and it's not enough. You need IV antibiotics, you need chest x-rays, you need things I can't give you. They'll call Robert, then Robert will come, and you'll deal with that when it happens. But you won't be dead. He stared at her. She stared back. Get up, she said. We're leaving. She drove to Mercy General with the heat blasting and her hands tight on the wheel. In the back seat, Daniel drifted in and out of consciousness. She talked to him the whole way, not because she thought he could hear her, because she needed to fill the silence. She told him about Mrs. Gonzalez. About the way her hands had felt at the end, thin and papery, like holding something that might tear. About the last thing she'd said, you're a good girl, don't let them make you hard. She told him about Patricia, about the phone call, the promise, the betrayal, About standing in her empty living room after realizing that everything she'd believed about people was wrong. I became hard anyway, she said. For 3 years I didn't help anyone, didn't trust anyone, kept my head down and did my work and went home and waited for nothing. She glanced in the rearview mirror. His eyes were closed, but she kept talking. And then I found you, and I stopped. And I don't know why. I don't know why you were the one who made me remember who I used to be. But you were. She pulled into the emergency entrance. Killed the engine. Don't you die on me now, she said. Not after everything. You hear me, you stay alive. She helped him out of the car, through the automatic doors, into the bright sterile chaos of the emergency room. The nurses took him from her, wheeled him away on a gurney, asked her questions she answered on autopilot. Name, approximate age, symptoms, how she found him, why she waited so long. The last question she answered honestly. I thought I could save him myself, I was wrong. She sat down in the waiting room. Hard plastic chairs, fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant and fear. And she waited. 3 hours and 17 minutes. That's how long Alicia sat in that waiting room. Counting ceiling tiles, watching the clock, trying not to think about what was happening behind the doors she wasn't allowed through. Then a man walked in. She recognized wealth before she recognized anything else. The coat, wool perfectly cut, probably worth more than her car. The shoes, leather polished, the kind that had never seen a scuff. The way he moved through the room like he owned it, like the air itself made way for him. He didn't see her, didn't even glance at the waiting area. Just walked straight to the nurse's station with the kind of certainty that comes from never being told no. Daniel Whitman, I was notified he was brought in. The nurse checked her computer, made a call. 2 minutes later, he was being escorted through the double doors. Robert Whitman, had to be. Alicia stayed in her plastic chair, waited. 53 minutes later, he came back out. 2 men in suits flanked him now. Security, lawyers, something in between. Their eyes scanned the waiting room like they were looking for threats. They stopped on her. Robert walked over, stood in front of her chair, looked down at her with eyes that calculated everything and gave away nothing. You're the one who brought him in. It wasn't a question. She answered anyway. Yes, how did you find him? Collapsed outside an abandoned warehouse, edge of town, he was dying. And instead of calling 911, you took him to your house. I'm a trained healthcare worker. I made a judgment call. A judgment call. His voice was ice. Controlled. The kind of cold that came from years of boardrooms and negotiations and never showing weakness. You made a judgment call to keep a sick man in your home for 3 days, without notifying anyone, without seeking proper medical care. Alicia felt her jaw tighten, felt the old familiar weight of being questioned for existing. He was too sick to move at first. When he got worse, I brought him here. That doesn't explain why you didn't call an ambulance. Why you didn't contact his family. Why you didn't know who he was. She cut him off, hard. I found a dying man on the side of the road. I helped him. That's it. That's the whole story. Robert's eyes narrowed. People don't do things like that for nothing. People like you don't do things for nothing. Don't confuse your world with mine. Silence. The 2 men in suits shifted. Robert's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. You expect me to believe that you took in a complete stranger, cared for him for 3 days, brought him to a hospital 40 minutes away, all out of the goodness of your heart. I don't expect you to believe anything. I don't care what you believe. I did what I did. Now I'm leaving. She stood up, picked up her purse, started walking toward the exit. My brother could have died because of your judgment call. She stopped, turned around. Your brother almost died in a warehouse parking lot because he was sick and alone, and had no one looking for him. I found him. I kept him alive. And this is what I get. Accusations from a man in a $5,000 coat who couldn't be bothered to know where his own brother was. Robert's face went still, completely still. The men in suits glanced at each other. That's what I thought, Alicia said. She walked out. The drive home took 47 minutes. She didn't speed this time. Didn't run any stop signs. Just drove through the dark with her hands on the wheel and her jaw clenched and a hot, sick feeling in her stomach. She'd known. From the moment she stopped her car on Miller Road, she'd known this was how it would end. Not with gratitude, not with understanding, with suspicion, accusation, the assumption that a black woman who helped a white man must have wanted something from him. She pulled into her driveway, sat there in the dark. Her mother used to say, "Do good anyway. Even when they don't thank you. Even when they don't see you, do good anyway." Alicia had done good. And she felt worse than she had in years. 6 days later, Daniel Whitman showed up at her door. She was in the kitchen when she heard the knock, washing dishes from a lunch she'd eaten alone, the same way she'd eaten every meal for 3 years. She dried her hands, walked to the door, looked through the peephole, and there he was. He looked better. Still too thin, still pale, but standing on his own. Clean clothes, shaved face, eyes that were clear and present instead of fever bright. She opened the door but didn't step aside. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I wasn't sure I would either." He shifted his weight. "Uncomfortable. But I needed to thank you, properly. In person." "You already thanked me. At the hospital." "That wasn't enough." She waited. "Can I come in?" She thought about saying no. About closing the door and going back to her dishes and her silence and her safe small life. Instead she stepped aside. He walked in slowly, looking around like he was seeing the place for the first time, which in a way he was. Fever dreams and fluorescent hospital lights weren't the same as this, the worn couch, the old television, the cross on the wall that had been her mother's. "You kept me in there," he said, nodding toward the spare bedroom. "I remember the quilt. My grandmother made it. It was warm." He turned to face her. "I remember that, being cold and then being warm. That was you." She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. "My brother came to see me," Daniel said. "At the hospital. After. I know I met him. He told me." A pause. "He told me what he said to you. The accusations. The suspicion. It's fine. It's not fine. He treated you like a criminal for saving my life. That's not fine." Alicia walked past him to the kitchen, started making coffee because she needed something to do with her hands. "Your brother sees the world a certain way," she said. "Rich people usually do. Everyone has an angle. Everyone wants something. It's hard to believe in kindness when you've never needed it. That doesn't excuse it. No, but it explains it." She poured 2 cups. Handed him one. They stood there in her small kitchen, strangers who had shared something neither of them fully understood. "I need to ask you something," Daniel said. "Ask, why did you really stop? That night, on the road, why did you help me?" She'd been asked this question before. By Daniel in his fever, by Robert at the hospital, by herself 100 times in the days since, "Because my mother raised me too." That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He looked at her. Really looked, seeing something she wasn't sure she wanted seen. "My brother has money," he said. "More money than anyone could spend in a lifetime. He could pay you back for what you did, for the work you missed, the supplies you used. I don't want his money." "I know. That's what I told him." Daniel set down his coffee cup. "But I need to tell you something else. Something I'm not proud of." She waited. "I came here because I have nowhere else to go." The words hung in the air, heavy. "Honest. Robert wants me to come back to New York, wants to set me up in some corporate position, get me back on track. And I can't." He shook his head. "I can't do that. I can't go back to being the family embarrassment with a corner office and no purpose." "So you came here. You're the first person in years who looked at me like I was a person. Not a problem, not an embarrassment, not a disappointment waiting to happen." He met her eyes. "I know I have no right to ask, but I don't know where else to go." Alicia stood very still. The coffee cooled in her cup. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car drove past. 2 weeks, she said. He blinked. "What? You can stay for 2 weeks. In the spare room. You help around the house, dishes, yard work, whatever needs doing. And at the end of 2 weeks you figure out your life somewhere else. You do that. After everything. I do that because of everything. Because I didn't drag you off the side of the road and keep you alive for 3 days just to watch you go back to whatever was killing you before. She set down her own cup. But I have rules. You follow them, you stay. You break them, you're gone. What are the rules? You don't drink. Not in this house. You don't bring anyone here without asking. You don't lie to me about anything ever. And if your brother or his people show up, you deal with them. This is my home. I won't have it turned into a battleground. Daniel nodded slowly. I can do that. We'll see. He moved in that afternoon. What little he had fit in a grocery bag. Us. The first week was strange. They moved around each other like dancers learning new steps. Careful, polite, aware of every inch of shared space. He washed dishes. She cooked. They watched television in the evenings without talking about what they were watching. But things accumulated. She learned he read books before bed. Biographies, mostly of people who'd overcome impossible odds. She learned he had nightmares. Heard him through the thin walls but never mentioned them in the morning. She learned he took his coffee black and couldn't cook anything more complicated than scrambled eggs. He learned she woke up at 4:30 every morning, even on days off. He learned she kept a photo of her mother in the kitchen drawer, hidden but not gone. He learned she hummed when she cooked. Old hymns from a church she didn't attend anymore. On the 8th day, everything changed. Alicia came home from her morning shift at the gas station to find Tom Morrison waiting by her car. Tom owned the station. 62 years old. Red face, thin lips, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He'd hired her 6 years ago, and had barely spoken to her since. Alicia, we need to talk. She knew. Before he said a word, she knew. Words gotten around. He said. About your house guest. My house guest isn't your business. It's my business when my employees are involved in situations. He crossed his arms. A black woman. A white man nobody knows. People are talking. They don't like it. They don't have to like it. It's my house. My life. And this is my station. His voice hardened. I've got customers asking questions. I've got my wife hearing things at church. It doesn't look right. Alicia, you know it doesn't. What exactly doesn't look right, Tom? He didn't answer. Didn't have to. They both knew what he meant. What everyone in this town meant when they talked about what didn't look right. I'm going to need your keys. She stared at him. 6 years. 6 years of early mornings and late nights and covering shifts no one else wanted. 6 years of being the best employee he had. And they both knew it. You're firing me. I'm letting you go. There's a difference. No, there isn't. She handed over the keys, walked to her car, drove home with her hands shaking on the wheel. That night, she sat at the kitchen table in the dark. Didn't turn on the lights. Didn't make dinner. Just sat there, feeling the weight of everything she'd lost pressing down on her chest. Daniel found her like that when he came in from mowing the lawn. A task she'd assigned to keep him busy, to make him feel useful. Alicia, why are all the lights? I got fired. Silence. She heard him set down the lawn mower keys. Heard him walk to the table. Heard the chair scrape as he sat down across from her. What happened? You happened. She didn't say it with anger. Didn't have the energy for anger. Word got around that I have a man staying here. A white man nobody knows. People talked. Tom didn't like it. I'll talk to him. I'll explain. Explain what? Now the anger came sudden and sharp. That you're a billionaire's brother slumming it in Ohio. That'll really help my case. Then I'll leave. I'll go tonight. You shouldn't have to. It's too late for that. She finally looked at him. In the darkness, she could barely see his face. The damage is done. Whether you stay or go, they've already decided what kind of woman I am. What kind is that? She laughed. Short, bitter, completely without humor. The kind who doesn't know her place. The kind who does things that don't make sense. The kind who, she stopped. Swallowed. The kind who helps people she shouldn't help. Daniel was quiet for a long time. I'm sorry, he said finally. I'm so sorry. I know you are. It doesn't change anything. What are you going to do? I still have the cleaning job. 20 hours a week. Minimum wage. She did the math in her head. The same math she'd been doing all afternoon. It's not enough for the mortgage. Not even close. My brother, don't. The word came out hard. Final. Don't offer me his money. Don't offer me yours. I didn't save your life to get paid for it. I won't start taking payment now. Even if it means losing your house. Even then, they sat in the darkness. Two people who had nothing in common except the disaster that had brought them together. Can I ask you something? Daniel said. You can ask. Do you regret it? Stopping that night? Helping me? Alicia thought about the question. Really thought about it. No. She said finally. I regret what it cost me, but I don't regret doing it. Why not? Because for 3 years I've been hiding from people. From life. From anything that might hurt me. She turned to face him fully. And then I found you. And I stopped. And for the first time in 3 years I felt like myself again. The person I was before Patricia. Before the walls. Even now. Even after everything. Even now. She stood up. I'm going to bed. There's leftover soup in the fridge if you're hungry. She walked to her room. Closed the door. And for the first time since the night she found him, she cried. The cleaning job ended 4 days later. Same story. Different face. Mrs. Morrison owned the building where Alicia cleaned. Tom's wife. The one who'd heard things at church. Services were no longer required. No job. No income. 30 days until she lost her house. She came home to find Daniel in the kitchen. Cooking something that smelled like it might actually be edible. I talked to Robert. He said before she could speak. I told you I don't want. This isn't about money. Not directly. He turned off the stove. Faced her. I told him everything. About you losing your jobs. About the mortgage. About how helping me destroyed your life. And for the first time since I can remember. My brother listened to me. Really listened. Daniel's voice was different. Steadier than she'd ever heard it. He wants to meet with you. I don't want to meet with him. I know. But hear what I have to say first. She crossed her arms. Waited. I've been running from my family my whole life. From Robert. From my father's legacy. From anything that required me to be responsible. To show up. To matter. He took a breath. But these past 2 weeks. Watching you. It changed something in me. Daniel, let me finish. You lost everything because you helped me. Your job. Your house. You're standing in a community where you've lived your whole life. And you don't regret it. You said you don't regret it. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how few people in this world would make that choice? She didn't answer. Robert has money. More than anyone could spend. And for the first time I have an idea of what to do with it. Something real. Something that matters. He stepped toward her. I want to start a program here. In Redwood Falls. Support for people who have nowhere to turn. Homeless. Elderly. Anyone falling through the cracks. Real help. Not charity. Run by people who understand what it means to need help and not get it. That sounds like a rich person's fantasy. Maybe. But I want you to lead it. She stared at him. Me. You. You have the training. The experience. And more than that, you have something money can't buy. You understand. You know what it feels like to be the person who needs help, and you know what it feels like to be the person who gives it. That's everything. I'm about to be homeless. I know. That's exactly why it should be you. The silence stretched between them. Filled the room. I'll meet with him. She said finally. But I'm not promising anything. That's all I'm asking. The eviction notice arrived 2 days later. Official. Final. 30 days to vacate the property. Alicia sat on her porch with the paper in her hands, and watched the sun rise over the street where she'd lived her entire life. The houses she knew by heart. The trees she'd climbed as a child. The sidewalk where she'd learned to ride a bike. Where she'd walked to school. Where she'd carried groceries for her mother after the stroke made it hard for her to carry anything at all. All of it about to be lost. She thought about calling someone. Her cousin in Cleveland. The few friends she'd kept in touch with from her days at Mercy General. Someone who might take her in. Give her a place to stay while she figured out what came next. But what came next? Another minimum wage job. If she could find one. Another apartment she couldn't afford. Another slow slide toward the same cliff she was standing on now. Daniel came out around 7. Sat down beside her on the porch steps. Didn't say anything. Just sat. My mother bought this house in 1982. Alicia said finally. Saved for years to make the down payment. Worked 3 jobs to keep up with the mortgage. She used to say it was the only thing that couldn't be taken from her. The only thing that was truly hers. Daniel listened. When she died, I promised myself I'd keep it, no matter what, because it was hers. And keeping it was like keeping a piece of her. She looked at the notice in her hands. And now I'm going to lose it, because I stopped to help a stranger on the side of the road. You're not going to lose it. Don't. She held up a hand. Don't make promises you can't keep. I'm not making promises. I'm telling you what's going to happen. He turned to face her fully. Robert is coming here in 2 days. He's going to meet with you. And whatever you decide after that, whatever you want, I'm going to make sure you don't lose this house. I told you I don't want. I know what you told me, but there's a difference between charity and justice. You lost everything because you helped me. That's not random. That's not fate. That's cause and effect. And if there's any justice in this world, the person who caused the damage should be part of fixing it. That's a nice philosophy. Doesn't change reality. It can. If you let it. He stood up. I'm going to make breakfast. Come inside when you're ready. He went back in the house. She stayed on the porch. The sun rose higher. The street came to life. Cars pulling out of driveways, kids waiting for school buses. Neighbors she'd known for decades, going about their days without any idea that she was about to become one of the people they drove past without seeing. She thought about her mother, about the 3 jobs, and the careful saving and the fierce determination to own something that couldn't be taken away. She thought about Patricia, about the trust that had been violated, the walls she'd built, the person she'd become in the 3 years since. She thought about Miller Road. About the moment she'd seen Daniel lying there and known that stopping would cost her something. She just hadn't known it would cost her everything. When she finally went inside, Daniel had made eggs and toast and coffee. They ate in silence. Afterward she went to the spare room, her mother's room, and started packing. What are you doing? Daniel asked from the doorway. Getting ready. In case the meeting doesn't go the way you think it will. Alicia, I've been poor before. I've started over before. I can do it again. She folded a sweater. Set it in a box. What I can't do is sit around hoping someone else will fix my problems. That's not who I am. Daniel watched her pack, said nothing. That night she lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. The same ceiling she'd stared at for 38 years. The same cracks. The same water stain from the leak in '97. The same everything. Soon it would belong to someone else. She closed her eyes, tried to sleep, failed. The next morning she got up at 4:30 like always, made coffee like always, sat at the kitchen table and waited for a day that would change everything. Robert Whitman arrived at 10 a.m. sharp. Black car, driver, the same expensive coat, the same polished shoes, the same cold calculation behind his eyes. But something was different this time. He knocked on her door instead of standing back and waiting for her to open it. He met her eyes when she answered instead of looking past her. Miss Brown, thank you for agreeing to this. Alicia, and I haven't agreed to anything. Daniel warned me you'd say that. The ghost of a smile crossed his face. May I come in? She stepped aside, let him enter. Watched him look around her small living room with an expression she couldn't quite read. Daniel told me about this house, he said. Your mother's house. Daniel talks too much. He talks the right amount when it matters. Robert turned to face her. I owe you an apology for what I said at the hospital, for what I implied. You said what you thought. Most people do. Most people aren't in a position to be wrong the way I was. He clasped his hands in front of him. Formal, precise. My brother was dying. You saved his life, and instead of thanking you, I accused you of something. I don't even know what. Something that would make sense in my world. Something transactional. Alicia didn't respond, just waited. I've thought about it, Robert continued. A lot actually. Why you did what you did. Why you didn't call 911. Why you brought a stranger into your home and cared for him for 3 days without asking for anything in return. He shook his head. In my world that doesn't happen. Everyone has an angle. Everyone wants something. Your world sounds exhausting. It is. He said it simply, without self-pity. But it's the only world I know. So when I encountered something that didn't fit, someone who didn't fit, I assumed the worst. That was wrong. Yes, it was. And now my brother tells me you've lost your jobs, both of them, that you're about to lose your house, all because you helped him. Word travels fast in small towns. He also tells me that you refused money, that you said. Robert paused, seemed to be searching for the exact words, that you didn't save him to get paid for it. I meant that. I know, that's why I'm here. He moved to the kitchen table, sat down without being invited. Alicia stayed standing. Daniel has an idea, Robert said. He wants to start a community program here in Redwood Falls. Support services for adults who have nowhere else to turn. He wants you to run it. He mentioned that. What he may not have mentioned is that I'm willing to fund it, fully, for as long as it takes to become self-sustaining. Robert leaned back in his chair. But I'm not offering charity. I'm offering an investment. An investment in what? In an approach I don't understand but am smart enough to recognize as valuable. He fixed her with his cold eyes. You could have let Daniel die. You had every reason to. Instead you risked everything to save him. Your time, your resources, your reputation, your livelihood. And when given the chance to recoup those losses you refused, because I didn't do it for profit, for advantage, for return on investment. I know. He nodded slowly. That's exactly why I want to invest in you. Alicia moved to the table, sat down across from him. What exactly are you proposing? A foundation, based here in Redwood Falls. You would have full control, budget, hiring, program design, everything. My role would be providing resources and staying out of the way. No one gives away control like that. I do, when I trust the person I'm giving it to. You don't trust me, you don't even know me. I know what you did for my brother. I know what it cost you, and I know that when offered compensation you refused. He leaned forward. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. What I don't know is what you can build. That's what I'm investing in. Alicia was silent for a long moment. I have conditions, she said finally. Name them. First, I'm not your employee. I don't report to you. If you disagree with my decisions you can pull your funding, but you don't get to override me. Agreed. Second, this isn't charity. The people we help are human beings with dignity. No publicity stunts, no press releases designed to make donors feel good. No using people's suffering to burnish your reputation. Agreed. Third, Daniel works with me, not above me. If he wants to be part of this he earns his place. No special treatment because of his last name. He would want it that way. Fourth, she hesitated. This was the hardest one. My house. I keep it. But not as a gift, as a loan. I pay it back over time, from my salary. I don't take charity, Mr. Whitman. Not from you, not from anyone. Robert studied her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. That's unnecessarily complicated, he said. That's my condition. Take it or leave it. Silence stretched between them. The clock on the wall ticked. The refrigerator hummed. My father built his company from nothing, Robert said finally. He used to say that anyone can give money away but it takes wisdom to invest it well. He also used to say that the best investments are the ones that don't make sense on paper, the ones that require seeing something other people miss. He stood, extended his hand. I think he would have liked you. Alicia stood, took his hand. shook it once. Then we have a deal. We have a deal. What do you want to call it? Redwood Bridge. The name came to her without thinking, because that's what it is. A bridge between people who have and people who need. Your name stays out of it. Robert almost smiled. Almost. Daniel was right about you, he said. Daniel is right about a lot of things. He just spent too long listening to people who said he wasn't. She walked him to the door, watched his car pull away. Then she went to the kitchen, took down the eviction notice, folded it carefully, threw it in the trash. And for the first time in weeks she felt something other than fear. She picked up the phone, called Daniel. It's done, she said. Now the real work begins. Redwood Bridge opened 6 months later in the old community center on Washington Street. The building hadn't been used in years, roof leaked, heating was unreliable, walls needed paint and more. They fixed it anyway. Daniel and Alicia side by side, along with a crew of volunteers who showed up because word had spread that something different was happening. The first person through the door was a woman named Margaret, 73 years old, silver hair pulled back in a bun, hands that shook when she held her purse, which she clutched like someone might try to take it. I heard you help people, she said. We try, Alicia said. Come sit down, tell me what you need. What Margaret needed wasn't complicated, wasn't dramatic. She needed someone to talk to. Her husband had died 2 years before, heart attack. They'd been married for 51 years. She didn't know who she was without him. Her children lived in California and Texas, called once a month if she remembered to call them first. Most days she sat in her apartment alone, watching television she didn't really see, eating meals she didn't really taste. I'm not homeless, she said, almost apologetically. I'm not poor, not really. I don't know how to do this, being alone. I never learned. Alicia listened, made her tea, introduced her to Daniel, who somehow got her talking about her garden, the roses she used to grow, the vegetable patch she'd tended every summer, the pride she used to feel when neighbors stopped to admire her tomatoes. I haven't planted anything in 2 years, Margaret said. Seemed pointless. Who would I grow them for? Yourself, Alicia said. You grow them for yourself. Margaret started coming back every day, at first just to talk, then to help in the small kitchen they'd set up, then to teach others how to make her grandmother's biscuit recipe, the one she'd been making for 60 years and had almost forgotten she knew. Within a month Margaret wasn't someone who needed help, she was someone who gave it. The second person was a man named James, 41 years old, former machinist, living in his car since his wife kicked him out for drinking. He came through the door with his shoulders hunched and his eyes on the floor, expecting judgment, expecting someone to tell him he'd made his bed and now had to lie in it. Daniel recognized something in him, the way addicts recognize each other, the same look in the eyes, shame and defiance mixed together, each one feeding the other. He took James aside, talked to him for 2 hours, not lecturing, not preaching, just talking. One person who'd been there to another who was still there. When James left he had a list of resources, a number for a sponsor, and something he hadn't had in months, the sense that someone believed he could change. It took time, 3 months of setbacks and relapses, nights when James wanted to quit, mornings when Daniel wondered if he was wasting his time on someone who didn't want to be saved. But by spring, James was sober, working part-time at a landscaping company, rebuilding a life that had seemed beyond repair. The third person was a woman named Ruth, 58 years old, Wanakuk when you're dead, you're dead, former office manager, 27 years at the same company until they automated her job and gave her 2 weeks severance. She'd been looking for work for 18 months, sending out resumes that never got responses, going to interviews where people half her age looked at her like she was already obsolete. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, she said. I'm too young for Social Security, too old for anyone to hire. I've got skills, 30 years of skills, but nobody wants them anymore. Alicia didn't try to fix her, didn't give her platitudes about doors closing and windows opening. She gave her work, small things at first, answering phones, organizing files, the kind of tasks that needed doing but nobody had time for. Ruth threw herself into it, not because she needed money. Alicia wasn't paying her, not yet, but because she needed purpose, needed to feel useful, needed to remember that she still had something to offer. By summer she was training others, teaching them the organizational skills she'd spent 3 decades developing, showing younger volunteers how to manage time, prioritize tasks, turn chaos into order. "You know what's funny," she said to Alicia one afternoon. "I spent 18 months trying to prove I was worth hiring, and the thing that finally made me feel worthwhile was working for free." "That's not funny," Alicia said. "That's the whole point." The program grew, not explosively, not the way charities grow when they're more interested in numbers than people, but steadily, meaningfully. A homeless shelter in the next county heard about them, started sending people their way. A church in Columbus reached out about partnering. A local business donated office furniture they were going to throw away. Daniel worked beside Alicia through all of it, not as a boss, not as a benefactor, as a partner. He answered phones and cleaned bathrooms and drove people to appointments. He sat with them when they were scared, celebrated with them when they succeeded, held space for them when they failed. Robert kept his word, funded everything, stayed away. Once a month he called Daniel for an update. Once a month Daniel told him stories about the people they'd helped. Once a month Robert said the same thing. Keep going. There were hard days, days when the problems felt too big and the resources too small, days when someone they'd been helping disappeared, or relapsed, or gave up. But then Margaret would bring Alicia tea, or James would stop by to show off his 6-month sobriety chip, or Ruth would solve a problem nobody else could figure out. And Alicia would remember why she'd started, not for gratitude, not for success stories, not for any return on her investment, because 5 years ago, she'd found a man dying on the side of the road, and she'd stopped, and that one decision had led here to a room full of people helping each other, to a program that was growing one person at a time, to a life that meant something. She thought about her mother sometimes, about what she would say if she could see this. Probably something like, "I told you so, do good anyway." Alicia smiled every time she thought it. 7 years later, Alicia Brown stood in front of a room full of people she'd trained. 23 community health workers, former nurses, former caregivers, former people like her, ordinary people who decided they wanted to do something that mattered. They were about to graduate, about to go out into the world and do what she'd been doing for years. Find people who needed help, give it to them. "I'm not going to give you a speech," she said. "You've heard enough of those. What I'm going to give you is a story." The room went quiet, waiting. 7 years ago, I was driving home from work. It was late, it was cold, I was tired, and I saw a man lying on the ground outside an old warehouse, a stranger, someone I'd never seen before. He was sick, dying probably, and I had a choice. She paused, let the silence build. I could have kept driving. No one would have known, no one would have blamed me. I had every reason to look the other way. I'd been hurt before by helping someone who didn't deserve it. I'd spent 3 years building walls to make sure it never happened again. She looked around the room, met their eyes one by one, but I stopped. I still don't know exactly why. Something in me couldn't not stop. And that one choice, that single moment on the side of the road changed everything. My life, his life, the lives of every person who's walked through the doors of Redwood Bridge since. She took a breath. You're going to have moments like that, all of you. Moments when you have to choose between what's safe and what's right, between protecting yourself and helping someone else, between walking away and staying. She thought about Daniel, about Margaret and James and Ruth, about the hundreds of people who'd come through their doors over the years, each one carrying their own burden, each one looking for someone who would see them. I can't tell you what to choose. That's not my place, but I can tell you what I've learned. The moments that define us are the ones we don't see coming. The stranger on the side of the road, the knock at the door, the call for help we didn't expect. Those are the moments that show us who we really are. She smiled. So here's my advice, simple as I can make it. Don't walk away, when it would be easier to leave, when it would be safer to pretend you didn't see. When every voice in your head says this isn't your problem, don't walk away, because you never know. That stranger might change your life, and you might change theirs. The graduation ended at 5 p.m. Families gathered, photos were taken. The new workers scattered to their assignments, carrying everything Alicia had taught them. By 6 p.m. the room was empty except for her. She stayed to clean up. Old habit. She'd been cleaning rooms since before any of this started, and she found comfort in the work, the simplicity of it. At 6:30, there was a knock on the door. She looked up. A young woman stood in the entrance, maybe 22, dirty clothes, thin face, eyes that held something Alicia recognized instantly, fear, and underneath it hope, the desperate hope of someone who has run out of options but hasn't quite run out of faith. "I heard you help people," the young woman said. Alicia set down her broom. "What do you need?" The young woman tried to speak, stopped, tried again. "I don't know, I didn't know where else to go." Alicia walked to the door, stepped aside, held it open. "Come in. Are you sure?" The young woman hesitated. "I can't pay. I don't have anything." Alicia thought about Patricia, about the money she'd lost, about the walls she'd built. Then she thought about Miller Road, about the stranger in the dark, about the choice that had cost her everything and given her everything back. "You don't need to have anything," she said. "That's not how this works." The young woman walked in, sat down in the chair. Alicia offered. Outside the sun was setting. Another day ending, another life about to change. Alicia didn't know this woman's story, didn't know what had brought her here, or what would happen next. But she knew one thing, she wouldn't walk away, not today, not tomorrow, not ever again.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.